The Badgers have a new quarterbacks coach. Why I'm not 100% sold on it.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Appreciate you stopping by. I'm your host, Ryan Herring, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Great show today. We're going to talk a little bit about Gard basically crushing the portal. But we got to start with the quarterback coach. I haven't had a chance to talk about Kenny Guiton moving over from receivers coach to quarterbacks coach yet. Let me start with this. Let me start with an idea called surface takes. And where I want to go with that is so many podcasts and so many analysts, so many media types after a draft, after a coach is hired during recruiting season, want to come on and say that pick is great pick, star, or that was a wasted pick, or this coach is the worst coach ever. And you don't really know. Like, we're not really going to know with Kenny Guiton if it's a good hire or not with like any coach that's coming in until a couple years down the road. So I'm definitely not here to say this isn't going to work or this is the greatest hire ever, because I don't know. Right. I certainly don't know. I can tell you on the surface, again, calling it surface takes, I didn't love the hire. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm also going to tell you why I think it could work really well. But primarily, I want to be super clear that I'm never going to blow smoke with you guys. You know, I lean positive. That's where I lean. That's my inclination is to lean optimistic. But I'm also not going to lie to you. Like, if I don't like something, and a lot of people disagree with me on this, and that's great. Disagreements are great. That's how we get smarter, and there should be disagreements. I think I welcome all disagreements. I don't love hiring a quarterbacks coach who hasn't coached quarterbacks before. It's as simple as that. I think Kenny Guiton has done really well up to this point at Wisconsin. I've talked to some people that rave about how the players connect with them. He got a lot of praise at the end of last year when Phil Longo stepped aside. He played quarterback at Ohio State, so he has playing experience. He knows Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell was on that staff when Kenny Guiton was the quarterback there. There's a lot there. And again, I'm going to get into why I think this could work really well. But ultimately, it's not a Kenny Guiton thing. I think quarterback is the most important spot on the football field. It's not even close. I want a guy that, if you're going to hire a quarterbacks coach, Phil Longo came in and it didn't work, but he had a track record of developing quarterbacks. I want a guy that has a track record that you can point to and say, there's proof in the pudding. There's proof of concept that this guy can coach quarterbacks and develop them. And Kenny Guiton doesn't have that. Doesn't mean he can't do it. Doesn't mean he won't do it. But I'm just telling you why I don't love the move on the surface. That's the reason. I think at Wisconsin, I think you can get a guy who has coached quarterbacks, who has that background. You can get that somewhere. And when you hire a guy who hasn't coached at that position, no matter what you say, no matter what you think of him, it's a risk. We don't really know how he's going to develop quarterbacks. To me, this goes back a little bit to the last years of Paul Chryst, where the quarterback coach was, Bobby Ingram, who had never coached quarterbacks. Then it was Paul Chryst kind of half. And then he had Bobby Dunn kind of helping as a GA. Like, he kept shifting people in and out of that role. I think that had a huge part of Mertz not developing. I think not having an actual quarterback coach played a huge part in Graham Mertz not developing. And I've talked about that. So that's my concern. That's why on the surface, I don't love it. I think from a timing standpoint, it's curious as well. Kenny Guiton's been on the staff. They've known him. They've worked with him. And I'm going to get into why I think this works too. This is not like a everything is disastrous type of podcast, but he's been on the roster. He's been on the coaching staff. If you were convinced he was a home run quarterback hire, I feel like you just would have put him in place a couple weeks ago. This kind of feels like there were other options out there that for whatever reason didn't happen. And then Kenny Guiton was kind of your plan B. And plan B is, again, that doesn't mean it's a bad hire, but there's more risk with a guy who hasn't coached it. Let's get into why I do think this can make a lot of sense, why it works. From a recruiting standpoint, everything I've heard about Kenny Guiton relates tremendously well to players. He's from Texas. We all know what type of pipeline that is. He played at Ohio State. I think there's the ability for a dynamic kind of young up-and-coming coach that is from Texas that played at Ohio State. I think there's some recruiting upside here, which I like. I think that is absolutely something, if you look at this hire, that makes a lot of sense. And then there's familiarity. You look at what Luke Fickell did when he came into this program. He brought in Phil Longo, and that's a home run cut, right? That's bottom of the inning, a couple men on, and you take a home run cut on a guy you hadn't worked with before. They knew each other, they talked about it, but they hadn't worked with each other before, and it didn't work. It clearly, a year into it, it felt like, wow, the philosophies aren't the same here, and it didn't work. This feels like maybe an overcorrection the other way. I'm going to get somebody that I trust deeply, that I'm very familiar with, that I know how to work with, that I know his philosophy and how he looks at football. I know what he's going to be like in the office. And that's not a bad thing. A lot of places hire familiarity. A lot of companies go that route. And it feels like Luke Fickell maybe went in that direction because he needs to know who he's bringing on the staff is going to mesh philosophically with what he's doing. So I think that in that sense, familiarity with Luke Fickell, comfort level with Coach Grimes, new offensive coordinator, and Luke Fickell and Kenny Guiton. I think all three of those are going to be on the same page. That's going to be a tremendous difference looking at what we had last year when they weren't on the same page. Longo and Fickell, I don't think we're on the same page. This aligns with the staff a little bit better. I think it puts them in a step in a right direction where it feels like they're probably on the same page, and that makes more sense, and they're going to see eye to eye on more stuff offensively. And again, I like the recruiting chops. He's been well liked as a coach. I think good coaches can coach different positions, and he has plenty of experience there. So there's a lot that you can like here. A lot of people have disagreed with me on this. A lot of people really like this hire, and I get it. I understand why. I'm a little more skeptical just because he hasn't coached the spot. I think there's a risk there you're taking, and it's got to work. Like when Coach Grimes was brought in, the new offensive coordinator, when he was brought in, Jeff Grimes, when he was brought in, the thing we said is, I really like this hire. That's where we got to. I like this hire. I think it aligns with what Wisconsin wants to do. I think we're going to run the ball better. I like what he's done. He needs to have a really good offensive or quarterbacks coach, because that's not Grimes. That's not what he does. And that's what we said. We said this hire is contingent on them hiring like kind of a great quarterback developer. We did a show on it, and I don't think anybody pushed back. I don't think Kenny Guiton was the guy that a lot of people had in mind when we talked about you need to augment Jeff Grimes with a really, really good quarterback coach. And again, maybe he will be. There will be nothing that makes me happier than if he is, right? I will much rather be wrong. And I'm not going to go out there and say it's a bad hire, because I don't know. Again, this is a surface take. Time's going to tell. For like all these coaches, time's going to tell with the new receiver coach, whoever we're going to hire there as well. Because this also, if you think about it, opens up a domino where you take Coach Guiton off the quarterback or the receiver spot, you put him in the quarterback spot, and now you have to hire a receivers coach to backfill there. So time's going to tell on these hires. Luke Fickell has to have gotten this one right. And Coach Grimes, he has to have gotten those ones right, because you're running out of chances to cycle through coaches if it doesn't work. So I think in that sense, I think Luke Fickell probably found somebody that he's very comfortable with, that he's had on staff, that has played the position, that's going to relate well to players. And next year, you have a very veteran quarterback. You have Billy Edwards Jr. coming in. He starter all of last year. He's a fifth-year guy. So you're going to have a seasoned quarterback coming in. And that's, I think, going to help the transition, not just with Coach Guiton, but also with Coach Grimes. So that's where I'm at with that. Again, on the surface, I didn't love it. I don't love it. It doesn't mean it's the wrong move. I could be completely off base on it, but I'm also not going to lie to y'all. Like I'm going to tell you the truth of where I'm at on it. And, we'll see. We'll see. I do think there's positives here, and I absolutely see the point of those people who really like the hire. Let's see if you guys are in the comments. Let me know. This is kind of a late show, so I didn't know how many people would jump in here. Jump Around Insider says safe option. I'm fine with it. I think it is. I think it's a safe option. I think it was a backup option, but that doesn't mean it's the wrong choice either. I mean, Phil Longo was a home run cut, and it failed miserably. So safe isn't always a bad thing. And I think Coach Grimes is a safe option too. That's kind of the theme of this offseason. Besides me saying solid all the time, being safe. Like, get the defense line to solid, get the quarterback to solid, get the offensive coordinator to solid. There's a lot of that, and I absolutely think Guiton could fit into that. Tyler Strieber says, let's go. Manhattan Project says, considering this position was open for a while, the fact that we hired somebody already on staff means we looked far and wide and couldn't find somebody else. I do think this was not the first option, at least when they initially put the board together, because otherwise you would have just put him in place right away. If you knew this was the guy, you would just have put him in right away, I think, unless I'm missing something. That's just me reading between the lines. But I agree with Manhattan Project on this. Jump Around says, haven't looked yet. Does he have experience as a quarterback coach? No, he doesn't. Now, he has played the spot. And technically last year, after Phil Longo left, he kind of managed the quarterback room and the receiver room, if you want to count that. That's not much experience. I wouldn't count that. But again, he has played it, and that's not nothing. All right, let's take a quick second here. Come back. I want to talk a little bit more, get your comments on this hire, see where you're at on that. I know there's a lot of people on both sides of this one, which is great. Again, disagreement is incredible. That's how we get smarter. And I also want to talk about Greg Gard, the portal overlord. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick break for friends of the show. Today's episode brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here. It's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. FanDuel is awesome. Again, the best spot where you find everything easy, parlays, futures, teaser spreads, all the sports are going on right now. It is the best time to get in this. Again, do it responsibly, but they all have a home run user interface, home run user support. It is fast and easy to deposit money and get your money back. It's absolutely phenomenal. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports book partner of the NFL. Today's episode also brought to you by our great friends over at Gametime. And when you get good friends together, you don't want to let them go. And what better way to get good friends together than go to a game, go to a concert, go to the theater, go to NASCAR, go to wherever you want to go and get those buddies together around a campfire, whatever it is, get those tickets on Gametime and enjoy life more. Let's do more in 2025. Find the tickets that are going to allow you to do more. Find the experiences that are going to allow you to do more over in Gametime. Snag the tickets without the stress over in Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account. Use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create the account, redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Let's all do more this year. Guys, I'm talking to you right now. We're merging through the screen. Let's do more stuff. We're going to go to a couple basketball games. We're going to have a meetup event for the Oregon-Wisconsin game. I'm looking at Gametime for those tickets. Snag the tickets without the stress over at Gametime. Use code Locked On for $20 off over at Gametime. Terms do apply. All right, let's jump back into this conversation here. I want to get some of your comments. I kind of want to start there, actually, just with where you guys are at on the Guiton hire. Jump Around says, I'd rather spend a lot on a QB coach than a receivers coach. I would agree there. I think it's more important. Zach Bartz, good friend of the show, says, actually not mad at this. Sure, he's not a big name, but he's a fast rising assistant, ties to Fick, good recruiter, loved by players at a key position. I think this may be a sneaky move. I don't hate that take. I can absolutely get that take. I think the recruiting is going to be probably a good thing with Guiton. I like the ties. I like the youth. I know he relates both players. Zach's not off base with this take at all. I again, slightly disagree just because I think experience at this position matters, but I don't hate this take at all. I agree. Mid James says, how good were Kenny Guiton's quarterback coaches? The ones he had at Ohio State? Or the ones that he's worked at as a receiver coach? I guess I'm not fully sure what you're asking there. Tyler says, thought it was weird we took forever to name quarterback coach after Chaim Grimes. Makes me think Kenny was last resort because they couldn't find someone to take the job. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say he was a last resort guy, but I don't think, just based on the timing, that he was the top option. That's another thing that makes me a little wary here. Adam says he's going to draw big-time recruits. What big-time recruits want to come here because of him? I'll say it's Longo. Longo drew big recruits. Now, I guess Longo put guys in the NFL. I think good recruiters can recruit, right? Look at, I would say Max and Pat have helped land big-time recruits here. And they talk about it. I think this recruiting department is really good. I think with those guys and a young, personable recruiting quarterback coach type of personality that is from Texas and played at Ohio State, there's cachet there. But he's going to have to prove it too. Like, this year is a big year. If Billy Edwards Jr. goes out and has a really good year, has a solid year, he's going to be able to sell that. And he has the backbone of a really good recruiting staff behind him. So I think being a good recruiter is being a good recruiter. Will he have to build some of that trust up as a quarterback coach? He will. It's not going to be right off the bat, but I think recruiting is something that he could bring to this table. Greg Linscomb says, didn't Paul Chryst hire a tight ends coach who never coached tight ends before? Bro, Greg, man, my guy, Paul Chryst did so much of this nonsense. Gosh, love him. He hired Al Johnson to come coach running backs when he had never coached running backs or played it. He hired Bobby Ingram to come be the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. Then he shifted Chris Herring over to like several different spots that he had never coached. The Paul Chryst stuff was bananas to me at the end. That was bananas to me at the end. And this is not that. Like, this is not to the level of hiring Al Johnson to come and coach running backs. Let me be super clear, because at least, and this is a point White Marlins made on the Discord, at least he has coached or has played the position. Kenny Guiton has been a quarterback, so he's going to understand some of the nuances of playing it. Whereas some of those Paul Chryst hires were dangerously bad. Rajiv says, recruiting is the most important piece in my opinion. I'm never bothered by not getting a ton of experience at positional coaches. Coordinators are a different story. Yeah, Rajiv, obviously, and I go back and forth on this stuff. Great dude. Definitely respect where he's coming from here. This is one that we kind of disagreed on a little bit. Obviously, bringing in talent matters immensely. I think at the quarterback spot, an offensive line spot, development is absolutely paramount. Because how many 4 or 5 star guys, and Rajiv, when we get back on, we'll definitely go back and forth because I don't want to have a one-way argument where he doesn't get a chance to respond. But how many 4 or 5 star quarterbacks don't develop? I just think at the quarterback spot, you need a great developer of guys. And maybe Kenny Guiton will still be that. Maybe he is that, right? I'm certainly not saying he's not. But you have to get somebody at quarterback, offensive line to develop guys. I think those are the 2 spots where development is the most important. And again, it just goes back to we don't really know with Guiton. Doesn't mean he won't be bad at all. Zach Bartz talks about really want to see who we target at the receiver spot for a coach. I agree. Somebody with recruiting chops again. I think receiver, running back, cornerback. I think those spots are all defensive line. I think those spots are like premium recruiting spots because I think athletes play at those spots. It's not that you can't develop players more. Certainly you can. But at those spots, you got to get premium athletes. You just got to get horses in the stable at those spots. And I think it plays up. So at receiver, I'm hoping we can find somebody that's a receiving, can really maybe have some pipelines, maybe bring in talent. I think that's the type of target you want to look for at receiver. And there's a couple of names that are already floating out there. A couple more questions here. Yeah, STN says developing is the most important. Raved about the talent last year and it sucked. I mean, both matter, certainly, recruiting and development. I think at the quarterback spot, you have to have a developer of guys. All right, I want to hit on this before we go because this has been something that's floating around in my head, and we'll continue talking about the football coaching staff, Kenny Guiton. Again, I'm not out on it. It makes me a little bit worried, is all. And it could work out incredibly great, and nobody will be rooting for that harder than me because the Badgers playing well makes me happy. And if it means I missed out, if it means I missed on the Kenny Guiton hire, that's fine. If they're better, I'm totally good with it. Let's talk Greg Gard for one sec, because I do think there's something interesting here where, again, Greg Gard maybe isn't getting enough credit that he deserves. The portal, look at this team right now and look at some of his recent portal additions. AJ Storr from last year. I mean, even though he moved on, you can absolutely say he crushed that addition. You're talking this year, Kamari McGee's playing a pivotal role, transfer portal guy. Max Klesmit, transfer portal guy. You talk Chris Vogt when he brought him in. That was a big-time depth piece that really helped him. John Tonje. You go back to Micah Potter, right? Like, Gard has really done well in the portal. And I don't think it's talked about enough. I comically kind of labeled this Greg Gard portal overlord. He's not perfect. Yeah, certainly a couple guys on this year's roster, Xavier Amos, we thought would be a much bigger piece. Certainly also we desperately needed like a backup 5 this year, I still think. And that's a spot he didn't add in. There was a couple point guards we missed at. But when you just look at the track record that Greg Gard has put together in the portal, it's pretty darn good. And that, once again, almost has to make you kind of confident going forward. Not only has he kind of adjusted the way he's coached, has he kind of adjusted the way the offense is being run. He's added pieces to his staff. He also seems to be adapting pretty well in the portal era. I don't know how you could argue that. You know, we talk a lot about portal misses on the football side. And it's not apples to apples. Greg Gard's been here longer. He's had more opportunities to do this. But then you look at some of the portal hits on the basketball side. Like some of the best players we've had recently. AJ Storr, again, was a highly coveted guy after we got him. We improved his stock, and as soon as he left, his stock went down. That's interesting, right? You bring in a guy like John Tonje. Tonje might be one of the best portal additions in the Big Ten. Not even might be. He is. He's one of the best portal additions in college basketball. That's the type of impact he's had. Kamari McGee, Max Klesmit are glue guys on this team. I just think he's a guy that, once again, needs a little more credit. Let's see. Rajiv once again says, really good take on the transfer. So many guys that have made such a difference. People question his ability to bring in talent, but can't really argue with the increased athleticism he's got. And Rajiv was on a show with me last year, and we were talking about what did Gard need to do in the portal? He needed to add athletes. Well, that's what he did, right? And we talked about it again this year. What do you have to do? You have to replace Storr. Well, he did that with Tonje. And is it going to keep going on? Probably not, because he also has to, like, some of the high school recruiting misses are going to bear some fruit here pretty soon if he doesn't turn some of that around. But he's really done a great job in the portal of plugging holes and finding fits for the scheme and what he wants to do. It needs to be talked about more. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up there. Really do appreciate everybody who's chiming in, who talked about this, wanted to talk about it a little bit. Got a good show coming up tomorrow. We're going to talk about 3 truths, 3 question marks, and 3 fictions about this basketball team. Dive a little bit more into what this team is going on. But on Wisconsin, great guests coming up this week. I think we got a recruit coming up. I think we got Nick Osen coming up. So you're going to want to tune in for all of that. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in as always. Nick Flav, as always, is a great dude that comes on the show. The question with Gard is, why can't he play defense as soon as he figures out offense? It is funny, right? It is funny. As soon as the offense gets clicking, the defense kind of seems to fall off. I'll say there's some of that inherently happens if you get in more offensive-minded players. Like the reason some of these guys are still in college is they're not lottery picks that can do everything, right? It's a little bit of one or the other. And if you play with more tempo, you're going to give up more points. That being said, the defense still has to get better. It is a good point, Nick. I agree. Jump Around says, I haven't seen the aggression when Tanjay is driving like I did in the Arizona game recently. Yeah, so defenses have pointed at him more. There's been some differences with the way teams have guarded him. That certainly happened. I thought, in the game yesterday, there's the good thing with Tanjay is he wasn't forcing it. He doesn't look like a guy right now that's needing to score 19 points, that's locked into just trying to get buckets. He's trying to make the right play. He's hitting open shots, but if it's not there, he's moving the ball. And with that is just moving the defense, because the defense is focused on him right now. So I'm actually pretty impressed with the maturity in his game, where he's seeing that and he's moving the ball and finding open shooters and not forcing the issue. Whereas last year with a guy like AJ Storr, you would see him force the issue more, even when he shouldn't have. So I hear you. There's going to be moments where Tanjay is going to have to find that Arizona game again, not to the level of that Arizona game, but he's going to have to be aggressive. But I think he's actually really started to let the game come to him a little bit, which has benefited the rest of the players on the team, in my opinion. Anyway, on Wisconsin, go check out Locked On College Football after this, or Locked On Big Ten. Really do appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we will talk tomorrow.